Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Welcome back to another episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all for sticking around. It's episode 59, and I'm going to make the amazing intro here with my co-host, Chris Hanna. How are you tonight, sir?
I am doing surprisingly normal.
Surprisingly normal? Not good, not bad, not amazing?
Normal.
Normal?
I have energy. I'm not super tired. I don't know. I'm normal.
That's
I'm
like a
not
first.
bummed out. I'm not super ecstatic. I'm doing pretty good, I guess.
Well, that's good. glad to have you back and joining us here on Cellar Door Skeptics. And for all those who are returning to the show, please remember to go over to Spreaker, like the page over there. That way you'll get updates every time we are live. Because we are live tonight. And you're welcome to join us in the chat room anywhere you want, any way you want, just the way you like it.
You can have us how you want us.
Anyway, on this amazing episode of Cellar Door Skeptics, we're going to talk about, I don't know, a whole bunch of topics, aren't we, Hannah? We're going to do a bunch of quick, rapid-fire segments about the range and spectrum of different politics and science, and we're going to speckle it with a smatter of entertainment. So, first on the circuit, we're going to talk quite a bit about the city council in Wyoming and a local friend of a friend who is going to be on the show next month once her schedule frees up, but she got elected at 23 to the city council and took a secular oath. We're also going to talk about an article that Mr. Aaron Furlong tagged the two of us in last week called Evolution of Whales' Legs and Elephants Without Tusks. And if you don't know who Aaron Furlong is, go back to last year in February and check out my debate with the presuppositional apologist.
If you just go to Google and just type in Cellar Door Skeptic debate, it'll come up.
That's true. Then we're going to talk about Texas inmates and if they get more money than school children do in the state. We're going to also talk about, I don't know, Hannah. We got to talk about the majority votes of the past. We're going to do a little bit about that. And then we're going to end the show talking about Trump's Twitter roars.
Ugh.
Twitter. I don't like that word. Twitter roars. And we got to touch on that because I have some documents, and he's recently claimed that if a bunch of illegals hadn't voted, he would have won the popular vote too. So how he knows this is what we're going to get into.
Okay.
And we're going to talk a little bit about his past Twitter history and what's trended and what hasn't trended. So make sure you stick around for the whole episode tonight. We are going to try and do a little bit shorter segments because we have a lot more ground to cover. But before we get too far into the show, I want to give a shout out to Ellen Denny for our Patreon sponsorship. If you'd like to join the ranks and sponsor our show on Patreon, please head over to patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics. For less than a 20-ounce soda or even an energy drink each week, you can help sponsor the hosts and their charity of choice. Patreon helps them create better content, become better activists, and it's going to help you also stay healthy by drinking one less soda or energy drink each week. So sponsor us today because we bring the discussion with the sources. And that's right.
They might not stay that healthy if they play the amazing drinking game now.
Oh, thanks for that. So head on over to Patreon. And again, we don't do this to get rich. We don't do this for the money. We haven't made very much money. All of it goes back into the show to basically pay for our Spreaker accounts and to pay for equipment updates. And then we also give a portion of that to charity. And actually, this year, Hannah and I donated more money to charity than we actually brought in for the whole year. So
I always give money to the Foundation Beyond Belief, just as my own personal
This is above
thing.
and beyond that, though.
Yeah, we went a nice big fat slap to was it the Atheist Nomads?
Yes.
And yeah, the little program that they had, that was an awesome show.
Yep. Anyway, so let's begin the episode out with a little bit of fun, if we can, because there was a candidate that joined us here on the not on the show, but on one of the shows that we listened to. She was on Southpaws, I believe. I'm not 100% sure, but I think she was on Southpaws on WPRR. And what she did is she came on to promote running for city council. And what's amazing about it is I didn't hear about it. You know, I heard her on the radio, but I didn't put two and two together. Then the Friendly Atheist came out with a blog that Hannah thought, hey, we should cover this tonight because it's local and it's kind of amazing what it is.
I was sad that I hadn't heard about it. I couldn't believe that. I mean, this is a pretty big story. We don't hear about these things happening that often. And so Hamad Mehta and his amazing optical tendrils and whatever the hell he's got out there to pick up all these great stories and how he finds the most recent and the most up-to-date and the newest happening things when it comes to atheists doing good things and, I don't know, bad cases where atheists are being discriminated against. He's pretty good at just kind of being like at the front line, keeping track of what's going on. And this was a great story that I didn't know, and that was what I had shared. I said, I cannot believe that I don't know about this. I cannot believe that something happened in my town. I live in Kentwood, which is just a tiny bit southeast of Wyoming. And of course, this is a great story. Hopefully this Melissa, hopefully that she is, not a crazy, baby eating nut job like everybody thinks we are. And she's just going to be an awesome city councilwoman who wanted to make a difference at 23 and got into the grassroots stuff, which is kind of my whole point about this story. Is she just said, you know what, I'm not going to just share on Facebook. I'm not just going to share on Twitter and argue with people. I'm just going to go out and do something. And she did. And she won. And it's amazing.
There, you said it.
Amazing.
It was I baited you.
It was coming out of my face, and I realized it, and I said, whatever, I'll embrace it for a good story.
Yeah. Anyway, so what I wanted to do, before we get too far, is I want to play her city council video, and then we could talk about it after that.
Sounds good.
Hi, my name is Marissa Postler, and I am running for City Council in Wyoming's 2nd Ward. If you're watching this video, you may have already seen my last video where I go really in-depth about who I am, why I'm running, but if you haven't seen that, just a quick summary. I am basically a young person who is increasingly frustrated with the rest of my generation, just not voting, not paying attention, and not getting involved in their community. So I'm hoping to change that. I'm hoping that if I get elected to City Council, not only can I be a liaison for other young people who didn't realize they could have input to what happens in their city, and also maybe encourage other young people to step up and run for office, or at least vote. So a couple things that I want to talk about today that I'm excited about that are happening in our community. First of all, we have a problem with our environment, as you're all aware, but I don't think everyone realizes how pressing of an issue it is, specifically in our area. The Kent County landfill is actually on track to be full in 10 years if we don't change our habits. So I would really like to be able to advocate for recycling at the business level and at the consumer level, and just do everything I can to encourage that we do it more and take it more seriously. Our community has already done some exciting things recently. They did an electronics recycling event, but I'd like to keep it moving in that direction. And I've actually heard some exciting ideas too from other residents, just other things, not just with recycling, but things we can do to protect our environment. So if you have any other ideas, please reach out to me online. Either email me at marissapostler@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, facebook.com/marissapostler4Wyoming. Another thing that's really exciting that's going on in our community right now is the 28 West Project, which, if you're not familiar, the city of Wyoming is planning this huge revamp of the area where Studio 28 used to be. And the idea is that it's going to be a walkable area. They're actually going to build another street parallel to 28th that kind of curves around, and they're hoping to have sort of a walkable, bikeable market feel. And that's really exciting. I'm super glad that we're doing it, and they've actually started construction recently. So it's a really pressing issue that people keep asking me about. What's going there? Do we know what's going there? And to be honest, the details haven't been hammered out yet. So what that means is our city council is going to play a big role in shaping the direction of the project. So I'm very intrigued by the project, and I hope it goes well, but my concern is they are sort of modeling it off of what downtown Grand Rapids is. And in theory, I like that idea, but I'm afraid we need to stay true to what Wyoming is. Just for an example, if you go to the downtown market in Grand Rapids, it's a beautiful building, but the items in there are just too expensive for the average person to spend on luxury food items. And if we tried to put something like that in Wyoming, I'd be concerned about the success of the project, and I'd hate to see it fail. So I'm hoping if I get elected to city council that I'll be able to encourage allowing the right kinds of businesses so that we can move in the right direction of the future. Because I want the young people in Wyoming like myself to stay here, raise our families here, hopefully stay here for life. But we just need to not overshoot and make sure that it's also accessible because our demographics are changing, our population is young. Wyoming's just in a really pivotal spot right now. So I'm asking for your vote on November 8th, Marissa Postler for City Council in Wyoming if you live in Ward 2. Thank you.
And there you have it, folks. So we don't want to spend all night on this, obviously, but
Well, yeah, especially if we're going to talk to her in the future.
yes, our goal is to talk to her. But she makes a couple of good points here, right? She was talking about the lot in what was it called in
Studio 28.
Studio 28. Yep. And they were talking about what they want to do and how they want to make it kind of this high end. And we talked about gentrification before. Now, I'll be honest, Wyoming's pretty white on that side of town, but the gentrification is a big, in my opinion, is a big issue, right? Because you don't want to put a bunch of high end shops on there because you're not going to attract the same attention. And if you remember, there's actually a mall. There is a mall there that I don't know what lives in that mall still, but
Nothing
Secretary of
useful. As far as when I think of like the Studio 28 area, like it was this 28 screen megaplex filled with movie theaters, and in its heyday, it was awesome. When I think of them loading up storefronts and stuff, I think, okay, that's cool, but what they sound like they're describing is something like Easttown, which to anyone who's not familiar with the area is kind of like where the couture, where all the high-end fine dining, like not so much fine dining as it would be suit and tie, but there's a lot of great cooks and chefs and stuff in the area, and they do a lot of experimental foods, a lot of high-end foods. Hipster is kind of a good way to say what it's like over there. But if they want to do like that, small couture hipster or really high-end shopping experience, they're going to basically miss out on the most of the people who live in Wyoming. And then also, there's a huge outlet mall that it just built south of Byron Center on 131 that's not that far away. So they can't go with like big giant box store type things. So they need to find something that makes them unique to create a unique market for that, as opposed to copying what someone else did and did well. I can agree with her saying that we shouldn't just copy immediately. We should try to make our own thing that fits our community really well. And she could find some way to do that. Maybe she can talk to people and get some really exclusive businesses that aren't available in the area, that are maybe nationwide in our country, and bring them in so that Wyoming could be the place that has that thing that some people want. I don't keep up on my shopping enough. Sorry, I'm terrible at this.
But the other thing that was interesting here, and we could talk about all the bad that's happened in the election, and we wanted to start the show off with a positive.
This is awesome.
Because for me, this talks to the heart a little bit. This talks to us about where we could go, what we can do, and it kind of talks about two different types of minorities. And we talk about, millennials, right? That was a big thing. And right after the election, there was a lot of millennials accused of not voting correctly or not voting at all.
We get blamed for everything right now.
And I don't want to say that they're wrong or they're right, because that's not this conversation. But in this instance, a millennial went out, and she's on the verge of millennial, I guess. Yeah. A young person went out, and she's ran for, a city council position. And while maybe it's not revolutionary, it does show that the city was ready for a change, or that not enough people was engaged.
Or
and
that
when she became
someone not being a believer is not just a no chance, you can never hold position.
Well, yes, and that is too. Now, after talking with Darren and listening to the show over on WPRR, they didn't talk about, she didn't talk about her non-belief beforehand. So it's kind of a pleasant surprise. It's
Ooh.
not this is not a platform she ran on at all. She did not run on that.
If she did, I think it might have been a different outcome.
And maybe it would have. But what it does is it tells you that, hey, let's take out part of this, right? Let's just take this out. The fact that what you believe or don't believe. Because in the end, it's irrelevant to the path that she took for a secular oath in office. And that was a nice thing, is she didn't come out and say, hey, I'm an atheist, get the prayer out of here. She just said, can I swear in differently? Do I really need to use a Bible? Is this something that I have to do? And the nice thing is she was granted that. She was given that ability to do that.
In the Patheos article, they said that they went through the list and they found them that basically they found one of the sayings that they had in a list. I didn't know they had lists of these things, but they had one that just was basically secular in nature, didn't really have any vote over like faith-based language. And so she said, that's fine, I'll swear in on that. She didn't need a Bible. She just held her hand up and made an oath. That's all you really should need. One of the things that they talk about when it comes to swearing in on the Bible, it says that it's been attributed to a ton of people, but it says that when I put my hand on the Bible and swore to uphold the Constitution, it's not that I put my hand on the Constitution and swore to uphold the Bible, which is kind of the Republicans' perspective of this. And so they think they're getting into office and that they have to uphold the Bible. It's actually the other way around. You put your hand on whatever book of your belief that you have, and you swear to uphold the Constitution. That actually, by logic, becomes the higher document in my eyes for taking the oath of office.
Yep. And for whatever position she had, I'm okay, to a point with whether she would have been a Christian or an atheist or a Muslim. It wouldn't matter to me because you're right. But for me, it was about her humanist discussions and how she wanted to discuss basically humanist tenets. And for me, as a progressive, that's where I fit in to this whole scheme better. Now, there is an article that Hannah found, and this is a little rather old article called What? No Bible? Conservative?
Yep.
Angered that somebody took an oath of office on the Constitution. And that's funny because why would people be upset if you take an oath of office on the Constitution over the Bible? Because what governs our lives? It's not the Bible. Well, maybe some people it is. For me, it's not the Bible, but it's the Constitution. What do you hear talked about all the time? Constitutional amendments, the Constitution this, Federalist Papers, yada, yada, yada. They don't talk about how the Bible founded America. They talk about how the Constitution is the foundation of America. And so it's amazing that the guy's name was John Brennan, and he was sworn in as the director of the CIA.
That's a big position too, by the way.
Yes. And
that's the reason why I thought it was awesome.
Yes, and he didn't put his hand on the Bible, but he put it on the Constitution. Now, that doesn't say he's an atheist or a secularist. All it does is say he believes that the Constitution should run our country over top of the Bible.
Or that
that's all it's saying.
Your belief shouldn't matter in the secular nature of our country. You can go into office believing whatever you want, but the Constitution should be the document that you are there to uphold and protect. You can believe what you want to believe in your free time, but when you're in that office, when you're in that job, you are protecting the United States and its Constitution. I had a couple other links that we have included in our description from a mayor who swore in, and I believe it was a senator, Kristen Sinema. This was from a few years ago, but it's just another person in a major office who just didn't swear on the Bible. And most cases, people say the same thing. Like, well, to me, that is the document of the land, and that's the most important thing we have as far as America is concerned. So I totally agree that would be a fine replacement.
Yeah, and this is kind of what was said, right? It was said that reciting the oath of office with a hand on the book that makes the pledge, one of our most absurdist traditions in government that was invented. That invented the separation of church and state. And so it's funny because he talks about that, right? It was discussed on NBC about how in reality there's no reason that you would have to do that because there's no literal followers of the Bible. Now some people may think they are,
Mike Pence.
But it doesn't mean that there is. And you know, as we close the segment out and we go away and try and come back to talk about evolution, I think this is a step for us in the right direction. And whether she's an atheist or not, hopefully when she comes on the show she'll tell us. But what I really like to see is the fact that we have young people getting involved, trying to make a difference, even if it's at just a smaller city level. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics to discuss evolution, whales, and whether they have legs. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
This is Heretic Woman, part of the panel of Holy Crap, the Vlogcast, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Hi, this is Trav Mamone of the By Any Means podcast. Join me every week as I talk to activists, bloggers, and podcasters about the intersections between social justice and humanism. Go to www.byanymeans.com, that's by spelled B-I, to listen to the podcast and read my blog. Besides, aren't we all a little bi-curious?
As if you couldn't get enough of us already, make sure you check us out on Twitter at Cellar Door Skep. Follow us, share our tweets, and hell, tweet at us any questions you have using Cellar Door Skeptics hashtag. Remember, follow us on Twitter for all our recent shows. Now, back to the show.
This is C-Web from ParanormalSkepticAcademy.com, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution. What was that?
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. I'm glad everybody got to take a quick break here as we just talked about a very positive experience. And before we get into the next segment here, and hopefully Mr. Aaron Furlong's listening to this, but we are going to talk about whale evolution. But before we get into the quick segment, I want to remind everybody to head over to our Patreon, because tonight we did something special. After the show, we're going to upload a pre-show to Patreon-only people. And I don't know if the two Patreons are going to like it, but I'll tell you what, you get to hear all the hilarity, you get to hear my kids talking into the mic, you get to hear Han and I banter back and forth about why, I don't know why he thought this picture on this thing was not Moby Dick and it was something else.
It is.
We're doing something special for those on Patreon, and we're trying to help build that so that we can donate more to charity and we can help cover the cost of the show. So if you like hearing what we have to say but want to hear us funnier or be sillier, go on over to Patreon, sign up for as little as $1 an episode, and you can get back behind the scenes content that nobody else is going to get. We're also uploading our shows there, so you can check out the shows there if you don't want to find us on iTunes or Spreaker. But anyway, so Hannah, why did you think this was a good idea to cover this topic tonight? And tell us a little bit about your intro onto this topic.
Well, we've got our resident anti-evolutionist who likes to follow us around every once in a while and just drop little breadcrumbs. Like, hey guys. So every once in a while, it's like, okay, dude, whatever. So Aaron Furlong, we had the debate, and it wasn't an evolution debate. We had the debate on basically God is moral and good, whatever it was supposed to be, and it devolved into a deistic conversation like they always do. And it was we had a lot of views, people commented and talked about it, but Aaron is still around from time to time, and he basically on there said evolution is a dead theory. And I was not allowed to respond because I was the moderator and was basically as middle of the road as I could be to be nice to both Chris and Aaron. But every once in a while, Aaron likes to throw this stuff my way, and he tagged Chris in it as well. But it's just a book / I don't know, whatever blog. It's called Darwin Then and Now, and it's basically concentrates on how science is slowly unraveling the initial thoughts and procedures and everything that Darwin proposed that became his theory of evolution. But the whole thing is this particular topic. It's the whale problem. And if you're not familiar with the whale problem, I'll give you the 10,000-foot view.
Yeah,
Basically,
give us the 10,000-foot view, especially when the first paragraph, it talks about 10,000 men sailing, Hannah.
Ugh. All right, so the 10,000-foot view on this is, if you've ever looked at a whale skeleton, if you're in a good museum, in Grand Rapids, we have a good one. We have the Grand Rapids Public Museum, and it's got some great stuff in there. There is a full skeleton of a whale. If you look down towards the end, you'll see these weird little bones, and they are the remnants of whales' legs. They're fully inside their body, and they're not, visible in any way, shape, or form when they're fully, enclosed in flesh. But those bones are still there. They're proof that they were once walking, surface-dwelling mammals, and they say they devolved back into the ocean. That's the argument here. And people are just trying to figure out, well, that's a conundrum, right? That's backwards. That's bad. It's the whale evolution nightmare. And then also there's another thing in here where they talk about a gene mutation where the whale's eyes are basically becoming broken because of a gene mutation. But it says on here that, we'll just go right through it. For early colonial settlers, William Bradford and Edward Winslow in 1620 sent out a business prospectus. Cape Cod was likely to be a place of good fishing where we saw daily great whales and the best kind of oil and bone. American whaling industry was just beginning. 200 years later, New England was the premier whaling center of the world. More than 10,000 men set sail on whale ships in 1857. So, whaling was a huge deal, and that's where the picture on this link comes. The mythical Moby Dick. The whaling industry was forced to hunt deeper and deeper in the ocean. Obviously, coming to the global ban, except for in places like Japan, where they still just ignore UN sanctions and stuff like that, and they still do it. But they pretty much killed who knows how many, as far as breaking down the population into extinction or near extinction, and it's definitely endangered. And that's basically the whole background of whales. But my explanation is the evolutionary, or my elucidation of the problem here is that whales used to be mammals, land dwellers, and they supposedly went backwards and going into the water again. So I guess let's start from what we both know about this. Tanner, what do you know? You've heard the argument, right? So what's your, first thoughts on why whales went back
into the water?
Yeah.
Why would whales go back into the water? I don't know. Why would they go back into the water? Technically, I don't think they went back into the water, personally. So if you want to, let's just talk about a base level without me citing research or anything that I've done, right?
Yeah, this is just our personal, what we know now.
Yes. So this almost feels like a chimps versus monkeys and monkeys versus humans argument, right? Why are there still monkeys and chimps if there's humans? Well, didn't we evolve to be humans? Yes, we did. We evolved from a common ancestor. It doesn't mean that chimps and monkeys stop existing. It just means that one small segment of them moved away. And, with the whole whale thing, to me, it doesn't mean they crawled back into the ocean. It means you had multiple species, and one or two or three of these species started crawling out onto land, started developing ability to live in both water and land, and therefore they split, basically, which is, in essence, what evolution does. And it kind of reminds me, and again, when we get into it here in a few minutes, we could talk about that, but it kind of reminds me about the speckled fish, which is probably my first big introduction into speciation and understanding that. And that's what it almost feels like. Inside of the speckled fish, they took them from salt to freshwater, they moved them around, and eventually, once they bred long enough and far enough apart, they changed all the different features to become new features, and then they tried to breed them again, and it didn't work. And that's almost what this is that you have whales that, on a micro-evolutionary side, eventually learn to crawl out of water, but it doesn't mean that the rest of the whales don't exist. It just means this small branch on the tree grew faster, which is what you see in humans.
Relatively, you're on a pretty good line there. Pretty much the idea here is that the whale's ancestors were the ones that were kind of these. There were other creatures that were on land, and they were basically amphibious. They had the ability to breathe. They had legs. They could walk around on the ocean or the water lines. And one group went into, more into the land. They spent more time above ground, above water, and they were fighting for all the food sources and breeding and multiplying there. Well, they looked at another group of these creatures that were more aquatic. They looked at the water and they saw very little competition. They didn't see a ton of, mammals above land fighting for whatever food sources there. They went into the water and they ate those food sources, and they were relatively alone in doing so. There was a surplus, and so they stayed there. And the ones that were better at swimming, the ones that were better at catching these aquatic food sources, got better chances to breed. That's the whole point, is if you have the resources and you're better at surviving, you will get more chance to breed. And so any evolutionary traits that you gain through the genetic mutations, so let's say this one mutation, a small mutation, allows you to hold your breath better for longer. Well, you can go further into the water, go down deeper into a bigger school of fish. You can eat better. So your kids probably will still maintain that genetic trait. And that's, we're talking generations and generations and long time here. But that's where that direction in the environment, it leads this creature as it follows the niche of good food and, low competition and back into the water. Now, I will argue that that's not the negative direction. That's the whole point here, is that these are both forward directions for this creature. The direction of time from past to present isn't the same way the evolutionary scale works when it comes to direction. Like, you can go back into the water, but you're still moving forward in time. There's still an ancestor in the past that you split from, and this is your new environment, and the other went to the other direction. So that's how, we've got a support for why mammals went down back into the water. And one of the things they talk about is 50 to 55 million years ago, that's when their nose and snout started moving to the top of their heads. And that's where, we started seeing the creatures at this time that were moving back into the water. They had wider tails. They had bigger feet, better for swimming. Obviously, there is the genetic trait that helps them become better swimmers, food eaters under the water. And it just continues to slowly turn into aquatic mammals. And we've got a couple of links in here. The one I really like is stackexchange.com, and this has got really great resources from, you can see bones, you can see the legs, the shapes, the things that they did. And they call them cetaceans, is the ancestor that the whales and everybody broke back from. But back to the original article, they go past this, whales were mammals and went back into the ocean, and they get specifically into the evolutionary problem. So they talk about single gene mutation. And so, Chris, that mutations are something that are probabilistic. So do you assume that all genes mutations are just inherently good, always for the better, or they're always worse, or is there a blend?
There has to be a blend, and I think evolution is that blind eye, right? We talk about mutations of genetics, and we talk about, hell, just look at the flu virus, right? When it mutates, you could call for the actual virus itself, it's a positive mutation because it's learning how to survive, right? But for humans, it's horrible. We just get sicker. And so, in essence, everything is kind of a double thing. So there's in my opinion, there's no real such thing as a good and bad, in my personal opinion. You can't have a good/bad mutation in that aspect. I think to define it or claim that is to not understand how evolution works. And to look at it that way is to kind of turn a blind eye to what really is going on there.
And that's the whole idea of what the Darwin theory, or Darwin Then and Now article is proposing, is they're basically saying that single gene mutation, it's the basis on which the scientific theory of evolution is based. They talk about Journal of Comparative Neurology, and how losing a single cone in the whale's eye as a mutation that seems to be spreading through the whale population currently, and they expect it will probably end in the blind whales, which would result in whale extinction. And they're saying this is a negative mutation in the negative direction, which is hurting and damaging that species potentially to extinction. Well, guess what? They would be just like the 99.9% of the species that have ever existed on this earth. There's nobody saying that evolution in its natural direction is always going to lead to a species working.
No.
It's probabilistic that these gene mutations could be negative and kill off a species.
Yeah, how many times were they wiped out, man? I mean, it's not like this is the first time.
And it
this
doesn't have to be like it doesn't have to be like an external event like a meteor killing everyone. It could be plagues. It could be genes that just couldn't handle environmental changes, like the atmosphere becoming incredibly less oxygen rich. I mean, all kinds of stuff.
Which is why I love evolution so much, but at the same time,
I hate it.
I cringe, at it. And it's funny, back in the day when Rachel, I can't remember her last name. Rachel used to be on Dogma Debate. And she was the evolutionist at the time, and that was when I first came out as an atheist, and I was listening to, hey Jim, and we were listening to the show. She came on and she talked about, evolution, and to a point how the Earth's striking back at us in some way, shape, or form. And they debunked all these they debunked, I can't remember the name of the creationist that was an atheist, became a creationist, yada, yada, yada. But anyway, he was talking about how, all these negative, like you were saying, these negative mutations are ruining things. And she's like, well, yes, but that doesn't fucking matter, right? Because in the end, in the long term and short of things, it does not matter that they're negative, because in reality, they're just counteracting for something else. And if the Earth gets too warm, what do you think the Earth's going to do? It's going to strike back at us because we're fucking it over. We're ruining it in some aspects. And that's the whole point of what evolution does. It's a counterbalance system, and I almost want to call it like I guess, like a sixth law or something like that. It's part of the natural laws that have not been officiated into that direction. And I don't know. I get befuddled when people say all these are negative.
Well, yeah,
because you're claiming an absolute, and now we're going to get into philosophical differences here, but we only got 10 minutes left in the segment, and I don't want to get into philosophical differences of evolution, but in reality, you can't claim that there's an absolute to anything at all. And I can't say you can't claim that, because there's still a probability I'm wrong.
Okay, so real quick to end the Darwin then and now thing is, in 1955 book, there's a guy, Dobzhansky, I believe is how you say his name. He basically comes to the conclusion that most mutants which arise in any organism are more or less disadvantageous to their processors. So essentially, mutations are mostly bad. And the few that get the good gene, they get to go on. They get to survive a little bit better. And that's the survival of the fittest thing we're talking about here. We never said mutations were always good and always in a positive direction, because that would link to, i.e., intelligent design, right? If it was intelligent and designed, why would all these things be negative all the time? It would probably be designed so that all these mutations would be good and leading in a good direction. So it's kind of making a hard argument for intelligent design by saying that these mutations that happen all the time are bad. Does that mean it's designed poorly? That's part of our argument. But moving past that whole thing, so we've pretty much put that down. The whales are back in the water. Not that big of a surprise.
Well, hold on.
Mutations, not that bad.
Yeah, and I want to point out something from that biology stack exchange. They ask halfway through the article, they go, why, right? And they say the most likely explanation is that crustaceans evolved to exploit unfilled ecological niches, or adapted to new niches that formed as a result of plate tectonics or other types of environmental changes that occurred 55 or 50 million years ago. And that's, I know that's what you were talking about a little bit earlier, Hannah. And I wanted to reiterate that fact, because I think that debunks almost that whole whale evolution
completely,
just in that small sentence. I mean, and they go on. I could go on for hours about the niches and how they're described and how non-organic and living and organics use these different things to survive. And that's just the thing is, if your natural environment changes, you're going to get a shift. So if whales evolved differently, it's because the environment changed drastically enough to allow for different species to adapt faster.
Yeah, they evolve directly to their environment. The environment places restrictions on their genetic material. So essentially, you could have all of the mutations and the benefit, but if those benefit mutations are in the wrong environment, you're going to fail. So, past the whales, I wanted to talk about something in Africa that's happening right now. African elephants, we all know about them, are being attacked and killed for their tusks, right? So we hear about this mutation thing all the time, and evolution is like, you can never see it. We never see evolution. Well, guess what? African elephants are being born without tusks because the ones that don't go tusks don't get killed by poachers. So think about that for a minute. The environment is proposing a restraint. It's proposing, death if you have tusks. So anyone who doesn't have tusks, the genetic mutation to no longer have them, is now a beneficiary to an easier life in Africa. So that's the new positive gene to have, and you become, a successful elephant that can breed and live better. So now we are seeing evolution this is genetic. This is small micro evolution, but this is an evolution to the environment. This is, elephants losing their tusks on purpose so they can live longer because the ones that have them die earlier. I mean, there are tons of great examples out here, and this is the really cool one that I think, now in some area, 98% of female elephants have no tusks. In certain species of African elephants, both male and females. And then in some Asian ones, only males have tusks. But now we're seeing, tuskless across the board because it's been such a damaging thing to have. I just thought it was a really cool example to end this segment on, saying, you know what, you can talk about the whales doing this. Well, here's some other cool stuff that's happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, and they talk in the article, and we'll link it in the description, right, Hannah? We won't keep people in the dark because we are the podcast with links.
Oh yeah, that stack that we have in our description is huge.
But they talk about how in 7 years, basically between 2007 and 2014, 144,000 elephants were killed. And there's a lady named Joyce Poole, and she's the head of this charity called Elephant Voices, and she's been tracking developments in that species for more than 30 years. She told the Times that she had sent a direct correlation between the intensity of poaching and the percentage of females born without tusks. And they talk about this, and it's amazing because 90% of elephants that were slaughtered between 77 and 92 were during the specific cultural wars, and it's someplace in Africa. I can't pronounce the name, and I'm not going to try.
Mozambique.
And Dr. Poole said that because these poachers are disproportionately targeting tusked animals, almost half the females over 35 have no tusks. Almost half.
That's awesome.
30% of these females born since the end of the war also don't have tusks. Now, so we could talk. There's your evolution going a little bit back and forth, right?
Yeah.
It aggressively goes, yep, we don't need no more tusks.
Yeah, well,
and now we're going to. And
people might have said in the past that tusks were necessary for elephants to protect themselves and fight and live. Well, I don't know, man.
When there's not as many of them to be killed by actual animals and they're being killed more by humans, in the end, they're going to evolve to stop the human thing.
Or go extinct, like the whales might.
Yes. Now, I want to stop for a second before we move on too far out of the segment. I want to look at that and go, okay, so if this was a necessary designer, right, or an intelligent designer, you're now saying an intelligent designer is interfering in the genetics of an elephant to stop poachers. Now, that intelligent designer could also interfere with humans to get humans to stop poaching. Now, there is an argument to be made to say that humanist philosophies and humanist beliefs are on an uprise. We can see that. We can see the change in societal views over the last, let's just say, from 77 to today.
That's
so in the
why
last
we call
40
them
years.
Progressives.
Yeah. Yes. And so you can say, if an intelligent designer is affecting this, could he be affecting that? In all fairness, yes. But if you look at the difference in the amount of harm that could be caused Why is an intelligent designer, instead of letting people's abilities to, what they believe in to evolve, why not create a gene that creates some sort of a dissonance to killing elephants, right?
Well, I mean, it's like the whole idea that, well, people are being bad, so I'm going to kill all the people and make new people. Well, if you knew everything from the beginning, why didn't you just make the people that weren't going to be bad in the first
I think that's
place?
a contrived argument for this thing, though, because, in all fairness, if we're looking at it from an evolutionary standpoint, though, Hannah, that elephant is evolving rather quickly not to have tusk. Could humans rather quickly evolve to have more empathy towards animals, right?
But we have to talk about empathy and emotion being something that's genetically derived then.
You're right.
So that's something we can learn in the future.
See? Good loss leader there. But you got to look at the thing here with this article and with what evolution and creationists are trying to say. And what they're going to try and relate that to is say, well, look, humans are evolving more empathy, they're becoming more intelligent, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, the ultimate designer, the intelligent creator, could also change and make it so that we don't have a desire to kill other things. Why, if we look at what the elephants are doing in their evolution, they're not evolving tusks. Why would an intelligent designer allow the evolution inside of humans to not be so vile? And this is not, it's not just vile because they're killing elephants. We could talk about some of the other vile things that are happening. For instance, go on the dark web. I challenge you, go on the dark web. Guess what you're going to find? Kitty porn. You're going to find it. And I was reading this article today, and I know this is a little off topic, but
wow,
there is this article from our friend, that we had on the show that talked about his abusive experience growing up. And he posted this link about how in Australia they just caught some of these people from the dark web who are posting what they call hurtcore porn with little kids that are being harmed, right? So where the fuck is your intelligent designer here? So yeah, maybe we're becoming more humanistic, but this is growing.
Well, this is the problem for evil now.
Yeah, I know. Thank you. But that's what I'm saying. And so, but that brings the whole point back, because if God or an intelligent designer, we'll just call it an intelligent designer, is intelligent enough to create small, minute changes inside of evolution, even if it's an evolution of humans, why could you ever use the argument of sin and the argument of evil to justify it? That invalidates itself, because in the end, if the intelligent designer is moving things just microly, right? Like we see, why you couldn't use the argument any longer? It no longer exists. It's no longer something that is able to be used
without faith. Without taking
faith.
A leap of, well, I don't know, so therefore supernatural God and all that wonderful jazz. So I guess we're going to move into the next segment here. I think that's probably the best place to go with it. So we're going to take a quick break, everyone. And the next segment is obviously going to be... Which one is it?
You don't know which one it is? Damn it. We're going to be talking about majority votes in the past. Stay tuned for more Cellar Door Skeptics. We'll be right back after this quick whiskey-filling break.
Hey, my name is Wesley. I'm from the Atheist Nomads podcast. Kick back a while and listen to my friends on the Cellar Door Skeptics.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist, and I'm alarmed by the intrusions of religion into our secular government. That's why I'm asking you to support the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics, working to keep state and church separate, just like our founding fathers intended. Please support the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
If you guys like what you're hearing on Cellar Door Skeptics, please consider sponsoring us on our Patreon page. Our goal at Cellar Door Skeptics is to help promote more science, skepticism, secularism, and humanism in the world. We want to create better content for our podcast and for you, the listener, all while trying to help promote local activism. We're going to strive to make better podcasts, and I'll tell you what, we're even going to contribute some of the proceeds to charity. So please join us over at Patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics to make sure that you sponsor us for as little as $1 an episode. Thank you guys so much, and prepare for the revolution.
Hey, what's up? I'm Steve Hayes.
And I'm Dave Curry.
And we're from ProfitCast.
And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics
on the Fox News Network.
They're not affiliated with Fox.
Everyone's a Fox affiliate.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Good job, Hannah, butchering
like
that outro.
I'm surprised we probably just chased everybody away with our door party.
Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. If you are not subscribed to us on Spreaker, please go over to Speaker and subscribe, because then when we go live, you're going to get an automatic email, and we don't have to share the post. But we will anyway. But you go over there, because we have a fantastic lineup over at Spreaker. You can also find us on Google Play or iTunes, and you can just hit the automatic subscribe button and just go boop, and then you're going to get more Chris squared every fucking week. And so, yeah, that's the second swear word, man. I gotta watch that.
Third.
Is it the
I
third?
got two of them in the last segment there, Mr. Potty
Yeah,
Mouth.
but it's because it's that evolution segment, man. You
It
get
gets
me
you
going, and then you get just wait, because I bet you, Aaron, if he ever even goes through this whole thing, Aaron's gonna listen to this, and he's gonna send us a rebuttal, and he's gonna ask to be on the show, and we're gonna have him on the show. But this time, maybe you should do an evolution debate with him. And
That's
I'll
what we
moderate.
were thinking about.
That's a good one. So, Aaron, if you listen to this and you're still paying attention, send us an email at cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com. Let us know, because we're more than happy to debate you on evolution. I'll even be quiet. I'll let Hannah do it, because I'm the over trumping source sometimes. So I'll let you debate.
I think
Hannah.
I'm a little bit deeper into like the scientific theories perspective as far as biology and everything, what's going on. I mean, you really love it, but I think that I might be a little bit more equipped for the deep dark science.
Deep dark science.
Yeah,
it's dark now. Is it funded by the dark side?
I hope so.
Anyway,
I sure hope so.
Anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit about presidential elections and the popular vote margin. You know, because that was a little bit of a topic, and we kind of want to make sure that we don't go overboard, because I do think it's unfair of us to sit here and say, well, Hillary won the popular vote, therefore she should win this. Let's get rid of the Electoral College. Or, on the opposite side, to say, well, Trump won the Electoral College, fuck the popular vote. I think it's fair to look at this, and for us, it's kind of one of those things where we want to say, hey, how can we utilize these statistics to look at this, and where do we go from here? So, Hannah, we have a list, and I know it's a Wikipedia list, but it's just a list, right? It's just raw numbers. It's not opinions. It's just raw numbers.
This isn't something that people go into and be like, well, you know what? I think it was 18 million, not 17,995, whatever. So the numbers and tables usually in Wikipedia are relatively safe to use.
Yes, and in this table here, it looks like it's only happened 5 times.
Yep.
5 times in the history of our nation that a candidate has won the Electoral College but lost the popular vote.
Yep.
Now, guess what? The first time that happened,
1824.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? Now that's back in the day when isn't that back in the day when you had to choose your your running mate to be part of your either your cabinet or on your team somehow?
As far as I know, they probably their brothers and sisters came on with them.
Jesus
I mean,
Christ.
at that point, there was probably 18 people in the country.
There
man.
was oh my god. Oh, Hannah. But no, anyway, so they have something called the Democrat Republic. I don't know what that means, the Democratic Republican. I don't understand what that means. But John Quincy was the first person to, win the Electoral College and lose the popular vote.
Well, the reason I think is Democrat, Republican, and a DR is we talked about it on the show, actually, a weird blending between the parties for Democrat, Republican, and then it was the old Whig Party, which basically shot itself in the throat and then bled all over the Civil War. So we'd be looking at the DR was probably something that was happening, sometime in the weird time before we had a separate complete, like think of maybe a Tea Party and a Republican Party. There's kind of two things that are kind of similar, and then they diverge over time, hopefully, to become a Tea Party, a useless, regressive group, and then whatever the Republicans are going to turn into. And the same thing happening with the Democrats. If they decided to split up and turn into something different besides the current party that they have now, this could be something, the reason why you see DR in the list.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to go back and re-listen to that segment. Anyway, so the next person on the list here is somebody called Rutherford Hayes, and how many people know that president?
I know all these names, but I can't tell you really much else beside that. No Child Left Behind. Thanks, President Bush.
And so then after that, it was Benjamin Harris. Then, of course, George W. Bush.
And he was the largest up to his time for winning the Electoral College and losing by 500,000 plus votes.
Yep. So he came in at I think it was a 51 or 0.51% margin of a loss. He was the closest. He was the closest to that half. The other ones, John Quincy he lost by 10%, and Rutherford B. Hayes was 3%, and Benjamin Harris was 0.83%. Now,
Gore and Bush was the closest until, obviously, or no, they were the closest and most recent. And then, of course, the most recent one we see on that table, and that's the King. That's taking the... It's not as bad as Rutherford Hayes, though.
Yep. And he was 1.72% so far. And I think they're starting to call some of the elections, because I think they called Michigan for Trump. And I know
they're doing the recount
there's
stuff
some
right
recount
now.
stuff, and
That's
I don't want to get into that 100%.
That's kind of the reason why, just looking at these numbers, right? So we have a total number of people that voted in the 2016 election was 62 million votes. And 2.3 million of those votes went for Hillary Clinton more than Donald Trump. So, I mean, a 1.72 number, that's not too big when you consider the total scope of the number of people that voted. Because to the John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson lost the popular vote, which one is it? I'm trying. Basically, back and forth in there. The winner had he lost by 10.44%, but the number of people that voted was only 113,000. So, I mean, each person is a significantly larger margin as far as the total percentage that happened. But the Donald Trump thing with Hillary, I mean, we're looking at 2.3 million. That number is really, really big. And that's what we're all kind of catching on. It's like, wow, that is huge. But when you look at the total scope compared to the others who lost the popular vote, I mean, percentage-wise, it's only the third closest. In 2000, it was significantly closer, but they had 12 million more votes this time with that basically the same amount of total turnout, though. It was around 54% both times. So, I mean, it was significantly closer in 2000 with George Bush. But if you look at some of the other numbers down the list here, people who won and their margin of winning was 2 million or more. I mean, we're talking the majority. Let's see, 1, 2. There's almost, I would say, probably close to 25 presidential elections where the popular vote of 2 million or more, 2.17 million or more, all the way up to just under 18 million majority vote win, they were the winners. So there's a majority of the presidential elections in the past with 2 million vote popular vote win. The majority of those elections ended with electoral college win and a win for the person who had the popular vote. And that's the reason why people are so surprised here, is that the strategic nature of the electoral college has seemingly switched around when it comes to the towards the popular vote. And it's, like we said, it's only happened 5 times. So people are really just, why is this happening with this big of a number? And in the past, we see these kind of numbers winning outright significantly. I mean, by 17, 10, 7, 25, 24% more for the person who won the Electoral College and the popular vote. That's why I want to check it. And that's why I think it's okay for some of these, pushes for just checking the numbers and make sure everything is where it should be.
Yeah. I mean, if we want to take a comparison here, right? George W. Bush over John Kerry. George W. Bush won by 3 million votes. There was only a 2.4% margin.
Yeah.
So, but that was significant, and that was for a re-elect. And, that's one of the things in here that doesn't talk about which ones are re-elects. I would be actually more interested in which ones had higher turnouts for re-elects. And, maybe we should do that. It just sounds like a lot of Excel work, but, maybe we should do that. And you look at Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter won by 1.6 over Ford. We had a couple of other highlights. They had Barack Obama over Mitt Romney, was at 3.86%, which is 4.9 million. Now, that was in 2012. Now, if we go farther down the list, down to 2008, Barack Obama won over John McCain by 7%. So you can actually see a decline of 4% of winning votes between the 2 years. Now, in all fairness, 61% turnout was in 2008, whereas in 2012, they only had 58%. So I don't know what the percentage between millions of votes are, but maybe there's a good percentage there, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty good-sized number when you think about it. If we're talking 300 million people in the United States and 61% show up, that's 69 to 65 million people difference. Well, I mean, where do 4 million people go? They just decide not to vote? Because, I mean, that's the one thing that I never understood, is people that vote one year, they're really entrenched in the candidate. Where do they go for their reelection or whatever? Or a lot of the Democrats this time, like, they didn't like Hillary Clinton. Well, I can't think of myself ever not voting. Like, I don't understand it. Even if I absolutely hate every single person there, I'm gonna go do something. Maybe I'll write my name down. I mean, just something. I'm gonna scribble, Porky Pig, whatever. I'm just gonna go and do something. Like, I don't understand how it takes. I mean, maybe if it takes a ton of time and you're in the inner city and you're part of the repressed groups that have a hard time getting a legitimate vote station and they're gerrymandering or whatever, that it's like, screw it. I'm not going to spend 3 hours going downtown dealing with traffic to go vote. And maybe that made a big difference. All of these really heavy attacks on trying to suppress votes. Maybe that's part of the reason why the Democratic vote was so bad. And maybe it was just we didn't like the candidate. But either way, we still got out and voted more for her than we did for him. And, I mean...
But I think you got to be careful here, Hannah, and we're going to talk about this actually in the last segment of the show with Trump and his Twitter attacks and how he's claiming there's a bunch of illegals that lost in the popular vote. We are going to talk about that tonight because it drives me nuts. But I want to be careful because there was reasons that the Electoral College was set up. I don't disagree with them. I do think that we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
I think modifications are necessary. I don't know. Did you see the meme that went around talking about Wyoming vote percentage per person versus California?
I did not.
Okay, so basically what they did was they broke down the total population of a Wyoming, the number of people that voted and the number of electoral college votes they had. So you divide that. So let's say there's 30 million people and there's 16 electoral college votes. I don't know really what the numbers are, but that equates to a certain percentage of an electoral college vote for that person in Wyoming. Well, the number of people in California is like 55 million. It's a huge number. Well, when you break down the total number of electoral college votes that California has, which is 55, I believe, the number or the percentage per electoral college vote that each person had is significantly less. I think it was almost 3 times less than Wyoming. So what that means is on the national scale, one person voting pro-Republican in Wyoming is equal in canceling out 3 people voting Democrat in California. And so what we need to do is we need to redo with the census to equate all of these electoral college votes with the census, so that if there's a certain number of people, to give that equal percentage to break it up. And that's kind of the whole populist vote and removing the whole electoral college. And that percentage base, the difference I think is a problem, and I think it needs to be rethought. I don't know the answer, but to me, it seems that a person in Wyoming having 3 times the density of vote for the president just seems like there's something to deal with here, and we need to fix that.
So I'm gonna play the contrarian a tiny bit, because the reason the Electoral College was set up was to help some of the minority areas vote, right? And Hannah, what you're talking about almost to me just says, hey, let's just justify getting rid of the Electoral College, right? I mean, you're saying that 3 Californians are worth 1 Wyomingian. That's essentially what you just said.
Statistically, yes.
Statistically. But if we were to even it out, you would have 3 Californians would get more of a say than those Wyomingians.
No, they would get the same. So
I know, but the whole point of the Electoral College is not that. The whole point is to allow for those that are in the rural areas, and you have to admit, I mean, you have to look at the rural areas. Now, I'm not going to argue with you about gerrymandering, because I agree with you on that issue, but I don't agree with you on that on changing how the Electoral College handles it. I think we would be better to look at how they decide to allow Wyoming to have more votes per capita, per se, than California, because it's unfair. If you get, and I get where you're going with this, because in the end, if California had the right to say and have more votes, Hillary would have won more votes. We would have had a more progressive president, though she's not a progressive in my opinion. She's a neocon. Well, no,
I wasn't even talking like who won whatever state. It just, to me, the total percentage for a person in Wyoming have 3 times the electoral.
But again, there's a reason, and I don't want to spend all night on it. And maybe this is a segment we need to revisit. But the Electoral College does that on purpose. There's a reason for that, because it allows, for the fact that you are able to get, specifically get in there and allow some of these rural areas to vote. And I don't want to take that away, because, I mean, think about it. If you live in BFE and you're like, my vote's not going to count, why would I vote? We got to encourage people to go out and vote more.
Well, the reason I say, like, you say, like, you live in nowhere. So let's say you live in northern Montana and there's like 12 people there. If you do the math, like what I said, that all of the people in California, they all have an equal percentage of electoral votes than the people in Wyoming do. So you have the same incentive to vote. Your voice is exactly, probability, statistically wise, the same. And so it's essentially would redact the entirety of the Electoral College and make the popular vote the whole premise. And the only thing that I put in here is there's a Vox article that I read not too long ago, and the gentleman that they interviewed is Akil Riedemar, and he's basically a historian, and his say is that so what's the real answer? In my view, it was slavery. In a direct election system, the South would have lost every time because a huge percentage of their population was slaves. The slaves couldn't vote. But an electoral college allows states to count slaves, albeit in a discount, the 3/5 clause. So the electoral college was created to increase basically the population, with one black person was 3/5 of a white person. And that's when the Electoral College was created, and that's what gave the South an inside track in the presidential election. Now, this is this is some historical stuff that I read just in the past. It's the Vox article. We could include it if you want. But we could make this a segment and kind of break down as to whether or not we should or shouldn't get rid of the Electoral College.
All right, I think we should, because again, I'm not convinced, man. I'm sorry, and I say that because I look at the same principles, and we only got 2 minutes here to the end of the segment, but I look at this on a different avenue than you do, and I look at it, and what do we do in terms of a minority society? And so yes, maybe, and I'm not going to tell you you're right, but I'll grant you that maybe it was originally started because there was more slaves, they couldn't vote, therefore the South didn't have as many people, and they couldn't have a say. So they needed a way to balance it out. But if you look at what we do with affirmative action, you look at what we do with all these things, and we covered this last week, and we talked about the one guy that was basically, he was a Trump supporter until he moved into a certain area, then he's like, oh, I'm no longer a Trump supporter, once he actually realized that there was a lot of minority issues that were affecting him. And he felt shitty because he lost his money to go to college for free because of them. But the problem becomes is that there's more minorities that it benefits than there is that. And now, yes, in my case, it did not benefit us at all to have some of these states vote less progressive. I mean, and that's because I think you and I are on a different spectrum, not a higher, but we're on a different political spectrum in our progressive ideas than even the rest of the nation is. I think you and I are in a minority in progressive ideas.
Oh, I know we are. I know we're significantly more left than the centrists. But
I want to caution you. And again, I don't want to spend any more time on this. You know, we really got to get out of the segment. But I want to caution you before we start getting rid of and dismissing the Electoral College, because I want to look at why it was instituted, how does it help the nation, and are we allowing minorities to have the vote, even if it's not the minorities you and I agree with? Because that's the whole point of a democracy, is to allow everybody the chance to vote, even if they have bad ideas. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics, as we're going to talk about Texas and whether they give more money to inmates in jails than they do to school systems. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break.
Hey, my name is Jeremiah. And this is David from the God Theory Podcast.
And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Prepare for the revolution.
I'm Dustin.
And I'm Wesley.
We host the Atheist Nomads Podcast.
We're godless geeks who take a skeptical look at
politics, religion, science, technology, and history.
We also interview leaders in the atheist, skeptic, and humanist community.
Check us out at atheistnomads.com.
That's atheistnomads.com.
Have a burning question? Want to share your thoughts with us? Think you know something that we would find interesting? Well, you're in luck. Send us an email at cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com. All your thoughts, interests, and help, just to drop us a line. Send us an email, cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com, for anything that you want to tell us or ask us, and we'll promptly respond. Now, please enjoy the rest of the show.
This is Matthew the Apostle from In the Name of God, the podcast. And you are listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Now, back to the show.
And welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. And no, Jim, we weren't sleeping. Inside Joe, go back about 3 or 4 episodes. He was giving a shit in the chat room because I couldn't get my headphones on and hit the unmute button, and I was trying to zip my pants up and pour another drink and do all crazy shit. But welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. And before we go too far, you know, it's all in good spirit. You know, Hannah and I do enjoy each other's company, but we wouldn't be a fair show if we didn't express our personal views in some aspects, right? You know, there's some shows that want to just give you facts and tell you we're a statistical analysis, blah, 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 blah. We give you that, but we also kind of give you your opinion, and we're going to disagree a little bit because we're not alike. I mean, I like death metal. Hannah likes only a little bit of death metal and like some crappy music, and, you know, he he likes he liked Trump for a long time until he had to vote for Hillary. But
Well, once the Spice Girls broke up, that was the end for me, man.
But one thing we do agree on is Jaeger. Right, Hannah?
Yep, we do.
We do.
And we also agree on doing those shots.
We do.
And thanks, James Coop Claimer, for coming on to our chat and giving a nice perspective. Basically, he's talking about letting the Electoral College remain in place with modifications is what it looks like. I don't know. We'll see proportional distribution of electoral votes and all that kind of stuff. So this could be something we talk about in the future. James, if you want to hear about it more, if you have a perspective that we could take in, maybe a little bit longer write out, send us a message on Facebook or something. We'll get it started, and that'll be a cool segment that we could do longer in the future.
And a shout out to Jamie because he helped start the Secular Sunday Assembly here in Grand Rapids. So
awesome.
Good on you, man. Love this dude. But and it's fair. And I don't mean to bust your chops too much, Hannah. I want to be careful because there's a lot of talk a lot of the time about how, there's a talk about gender identification politics and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not going to get into that tonight because I don't agree with some more conservative stances. I do believe we should be looking towards fixing some of these things, but I don't think fixing it is essentially eliminating the Electoral College. Now you do, and that's fine.
Well, I'm open at least for trying to blend it. I don't have to remove it entirely, but to at least make some modifications because these numbers that were set up a while ago, as in years and years, decades, I would like to see some kind of updates. Like I think we can do something to try to modify it and make it a little bit more evenly balanced. And then if that continues to show these crazy popular vote discrepancies between the Electoral College winners, then yeah, I think maybe we need to do something different. But I would just like to change something. That's one of the whole ideas about
I know. You're a Bernie-crat. You got to change something, man.
Yeah.
It's a revolution, which is the name of the show, right? It's a slow revolution. And the numbers, and again,
and the slow revolution would say the change as opposed to remove. So let's go with that.
And I don't disagree with you that we shouldn't look at it and say, hey, is there some changes that could be made? But I think you and I need to do more research, and I think we would do the listeners a disservice to try and tackle that without further research, because we need to understand why it was instituted, how it got here, how does it change, and are the same constraints that it was used to set up for still being used today?
And it wasn't in the intended direction of this segment. This is kind of a tangent that we kind of both got into, and it turned into a cool conversation. So we'll finish it with some research in the future.
Yeah. But for this segment right here, and
this one
right, this specific
here.
one, yep, on this amazing show here, we're gonna talk about. God damn it, we're gonna talk about the spending of Texas, right? Texas spends money. They do.
Oh yeah,
just like every other state.
They ruin textbooks, but we'll talk about that with a Ron.
Yeah, that's a whole different topic, man. You're taking us off tangent. No. So no. But in this one, so there's a political fact article that came across, and they talk about Democratic Jeannie Lou Leader says Texas spends more money per inmate than they spend per public school student.
That's so horrible.
I would agree with you. Now, so on the surface, right here, what that tells me on the surface is that that's horrible, right? Now, we're going to have to read the research, and we're going to have to look at the numbers in a minute, and we will do that. But the first question I have, do you know, Hannah, how much of the state-funded prison and inmate costs are out of the state pocket, and how much is private, inmates? I mean, how are private prisons? Do you know if Texas has a private prison?
I don't know if Texas participates specifically in the private prison. I didn't notice that there's anything in the quick skimming of this, to quick overlook of this article, but I do know that in Texas and California, two of the largest lobbies of the state governments are their prison guard population and the prison guard unions. So, I mean, we're looking at these really strong groups of people who throw a lot of political money around that are essentially part of the prison complex, either part of the state prison complex or even the private one. And that is a real big reason why we see a really big, push to keep as many people in prison as possible. A lot of these states have clauses with contracts with these prisons. That if the prison gets built, they're guaranteed to stay full. So the prison says that if we build this, if we invest this money, you have to give us inmates. You have to keep all of our beds full. And that feels kind of weird to me. Like, shouldn't it be the natural ideological view of a prison system is to put itself out of business? I mean, shouldn't that kind of be the whole idea, right?
Well, yes, and okay, so that leads into two things. I mean, that's one of the reasons I supported decriminalized GR, because in Kentwood it was the same thing. In Grand Rapids it was the same type of thing. They wanted to arrest people because they needed to fill a quota, basically. And people talk about how that's an illusionary or a disproportionate understanding of the system, but it's not. In relative to Orange, Grand Rapids, and decriminalized.
Jaeger.
But, in all fairness, I understand why they would want to fill them, because it does create a cost. But that's what happens when you run a place like a business, right?
Yeah.
Now, what would be smart is if they were able to create sectionalized prisons and sectionalized jail cells that allowed for you to be able to use the other side for other things, right? So could you hold your parole house in there? Could you hold, your counseling sessions? Could you hold AA groups and all these other things that could buy into that easier if you segregated it and allowed for just portions of it to be, lockdowns and this different thing? People have this issue. They don't want to associate specifically with, people that have
correction
in jail.
facilities.
Yeah, they don't. You don't want to hold an AA thing in prison unless it has to do with the inmates. So, if you're,
could you come down to the AA meeting at the local prison? We promise, if you don't say anything bad, we won't just toss you in a cell and immediately. Yeah, no, I've never really thought of that way. That people would be like, no, I don't want to go there. If obviously, if it's a correctional facility, people aren't going to naturally want to go to that place if they have community gatherings there. But I mean, my assumption is that a lot of these types of places are not in downtown in the city. They don't build these places right in a local area. So in order to have your local AA or whatever, let's say you got a bunch of DUIs, you can't drive to the prison way the heck out of the way. It'd be really difficult. So I would think that those kinds of places, that communal place, would still need to be in a major metropolitan area. And the prisons, they're way out in boons for a reason. If someone breaks out, they can't just jump right into the urban landscape and disappear.
Yes. But where I was going in that direction is if you look at what's being talked about in this article here, and you look at, they debunk a couple of different things, but what you're looking at is where they're spending their dollars and what they're spending their dollars on. And if you run a prison based on the fact that to keep it full, that's how you produce your capital, you are going to lose in that aspect. You're going to be strained to find people to fill these beds, to fill these centers, to do all these different things. And then you're going to have companies that supply the food sources, the toilet papers, the different things like that. And I only know this because I worked at a toilet paper supply company. And, we had contracts with a couple of major prisons in Michigan for a little while. And it was, how can we go in there and sell them more money? Do they need the shit? Well, I don't know. Their prison population's down, but hey, you still need more toilet paper, And so it's that capitalist mentality sometimes that blinds us to seeing that, hey, prisons, the capitalist mentality is not going to benefit the prisons unless we're just looking at how to reduce costs. But we can't use labor and filling beds as a way to reduce costs. We have to look at how can we make this cheaper, or reutilize some of this facility for something else, right?
Or how can we take the funds that we're currently using to create new housing, to create new holding facilities, and turn that into making less criminals?
Exactly. And you're exactly right. And because when you put somebody in jail, and it's funny because some of the books I'm reading and stuff like that talk about, people going to prison and what this guy walked out of, after a rape sentence, and I'm not saying he shouldn't have got a rape sentence, but he got a life sentence for a rape sentence with the possibility of parole. Well, finally he gets granted parole 35 years later. You know how much money they gave him when he walked out of prison? $2,200. Right? Because that's all he could make in the 35 years. And some people are going to argue.
So he wasn't found not guilty.
Oh, he was found guilty. And he even admitted to it.
I mean, he basically gets out of jail. And this is okay, start your life over with $2,200.
Yep. But we're going to bill you for your parole officers. We're going to bill you for every visit. We're going to bill you for every drug test. And they could drop you for any reason when you're on prison parole, right?
Whoa. They actually bill you for parole? I didn't know that.
They don't bill. Okay, in the book they're talking about it. They didn't say which states do that, just so you know. I don't know which states do it, but in this specific case, this guy didn't get billed for his parole, but he got billed for the state's time to interact with him. Yes.
Wow.
So like the drug test. Yeah, he got billed for the drug test. And he got billed for his time in prison. And that's the thing. That's the thing. You have to look at that. If you put somebody in jail and then bill them for their time in jail, isn't that like double dipping? That's kind of like a double dipping right there by the state. But what is that guy going to do? Because guess what? What is it harder to do when you get out of jail? Get a job. And so they got this guy a job making $11 an hour, which is good, and they gave him public housing. But yet, he had to pay for some of the public housing. It wasn't free. And he had to pay for transportation, but you couldn't get a license because he was a felon. You can't have a license.
We talked about, actually, you know what? I don't know if we did talk about the, we did. We talked about it with Dennis Murphy when he came on, and we talked about the don't check the box or no box to check. Basically, if you had been in prison and you served your debt to society, that you did not have to check that box unless it was relevant to whatever job you were trying to get, because we do have a bias against anyone who has ever made a mistake in society and they were sentenced to whatever their penance may be. They get out, they try to start their lives over, and they can never, ever actually integrate back into society because of that earmark. And, this is something that some states are playing with, is seeing whether or not it needs to be relevant. So if you are obviously trying to get a daycare job position and you have a history of sexual assault against minors, then yes, obviously you'll never get that a job. You have to notify them, and they would probably find that in a background check. But like, let's say you're trying to get a job at a packaging factory. Like, they don't need to know if you're a former felon. If you paid your debt to society, you should be able to, I'm done. Here's the deal. This is not even remotely relevant to my job that I'm applying for. I want a job. Let me get back on my feet and start myself into becoming a productive, tax-paying member of society, right? And so this could be a good area where we talk about prison reform and, trying to get this reduced. But when we talk about the costs and all this stuff that's involved with being a prisoner, well, what's the cost of being a student, right? So this was a PolitiFact Virginia rated half-true statement by Senator Bernie Sanders that he said that it costs more to go to prison than the University of Virginia. Sanders based his claim on what it costs to house a federal prisoner, but at the state level, cost comes out to be less than a year's fees they attended university. So it depends on where you're getting your data for comparing who and what costs more. So if you talk about the federal level, then it costs more to go to prison than University of Virginia. But if you look at the state level deal to when you go to a university and you're a state resident, it's significantly cheaper. And so that's where there's a discrepancy. That's why they call it a half-truth. But these kinds of things happen pretty consistently. In 2016, and this is still in a PolitiFact article, the U.S. Department of Education released a report to compare the rise in prison spending with the rate of spending on public education. And the report found that nationwide, public pre-K through 12 expenditures went up 107%, while state and local corrections expenditures went up by 324% over the 3-year period. So we're spending much more. If it's not on a per student basis, just overall, pre-K to 12 and prisons, I mean, these schools are not getting the same as our prisons. And I think the best way to, readjust society and try to adjust things, you have to start with the kid. Why do you think they say, get to the kids, get to the children, start with the kids when it comes to getting into religious environments? And I mean, that's the earliest place for impressioning a good religious believing citizen. Well, that's also the best place you can get to get a good functioning, well-educated, awesome person, a citizen that you want our society to be filled with. And if you do that, you put the investment at the beginning, you will see the long-term, benefits. And I would hope that I mean, this is a great article that basically explains we are spending money in the wrong place.
Yeah. And there's some people that, if we were in business, right, and we were to look at this from a business perspective, we would look at where are the costs going, and you would Pareto it out. And so if you Pareto it out and the costs are going to, let's just say, management of it, and they're increasing, then we go, how much value is management bringing? If we could justify that increase in management costs, can we justify that increase, to state taxpayers, right?
Yeah. So what's our benefit?
Yeah,
so we
what's
put
your
a dollar
benefit?
in.
Yes.
What do we get back?
Exactly. And so in this article, it talks about how they're spending basically $55 a day on inmates versus $47.73 on Texas school students. Now, obviously that shows higher.
Yeah.
But to a point we have to do something. But so what are the majority of the criminals, right? So what are we housing them for? If all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, 80% of these that are being housed are for nonviolent crimes, we should look at that. If only 10% are nonviolent crimes, then okay, that's not something you would look at. You would look at the higher thing, because Pareto tells us, that the majority of issues are usually caused by the least amount of things. So you wouldn't have the same predicament.
Well, if 40% of the people in these prisons are all for just, he had a gram of marijuana on him, I mean, that's an easy fix, right?
Yes, in that aspect, yes. If it's a that's only one nonviolent offense. I want to be careful here. I agree with you. I don't want to turn this into a pro marijuana segment, but I want to
slippery slope alert.
Slippery slope alert. You're leading me down the trail. But in all fairness, Hannah, to your point, why are they not presenting us with these? And this is why I don't like. This is my argument against. A little bit against, private prisons, because they are in it for the money, right? They have to make money on this, whereas the state, this shouldn't be a form of cost reduction, it should be a form of cost reduction versus a increase in capital. And the state's not here to make money, and neither should your prison system. If your prison system is making money, what are they doing to give it back? Why do we not have nonprofit systems then, right? We have all these charities to help homeless people. Why don't we have these charities to help felons? And I know this is a touchy subject, because there's a lot of people that don't want to talk about it. They don't want to hear about it. They have a hard time because some of these people are sex offenders. Some of these people are murderers. Some of these people are rapists, and we don't want them on the street. And
obviously,
we don't want to reduce the cost and give them horrible ways of living. What we have to do then is say, okay, if our largest offender, 40% of them, is nonviolent, less than a gram substance abuse offenders, why are we imprisoning them? Why wouldn't we take that money and say, okay, we're going to split it, right? We're going to take all these people out of prison, and we're going to take half the money that we would go to them for this year and spend it on programs to help them, to put them back in their feet, to get them back into jobs.
Well, this is bringing the idea of treating mental illness and addiction as a disease, a medical health problem, versus a criminal offense. I mean, that alone is going to increase the total number of people that are going through the medical system. It could be reducing costs because there's more patients, more need for medical care. It could also be reducing costs as far as the number of people that are just wallowing in squalor, having mental issues in prison, and they're more likely to redact and become criminals again as far as our drug policies are concerned in this country. I mean, there are changes that we could make, but there are more financial benefits to maintain the status as it is, because one of the things that, like I said earlier, that the prison complex itself should be ideologically inclined to put itself out of business. But that doesn't seem like what's happening here. It seems like it's growing. And we, as far as I know, we are the largest imprisonment country in the world. I mean, ahead of China. I mean, we are a massive, massive population. I think, what was it, like 1% or something along those lines? Like a large number. And so you have to ask yourself, are we trying to reduce this number, or is this a money-making endeavor? There are people investing in prisons like, hey, I can put $20 in there and turn it into 60 in 10 years or something. I mean, that kind of thing shouldn't be happening. We shouldn't be making money on people going to jail and having society have problems. We should be trying to reform those issues, but it doesn't seem like we're trying to reform them. We're trying to make money off of them, and that is incredibly dark, and it's a weird place that I'm not comfortable with. I don't think it's a good place that we should be trying to make economic gains in, and that obviously we should be trying to change. But as far as removing private prisons, of course, that's an easy place to get rid of it. But as far as the public systems, like you said, getting rid of the nonviolent offenders, that's a good start.
Yep. And the report says the contention holds up. If you divide total costs for prisons versus schools by the calendar year, it's also narrowly so by 17 cents a day in 20 towns. So we found this claim to be true, but not according to 180-day comparison. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
Hello,
talking about
I'm
Trump
Miss
and Twitter wars.
I'm Amanda Wright, and we're promoting secular feminism.
And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
What's something I could do with a very sexy lady friend of mine that people would find provocative, interesting, and entertaining enough to tune in week after week? Oh, I know. A podcast. If you'd like to hear me and Kate be provocative and thought-provoking week after week, join us on the Unbuckling the Bible Belt podcast. We'd love for you to be part of our audiological three-way.
Looking for something new and exciting, or maybe just a change from the old Atheist show format? Cellar Door Skeptics podcast provides listeners with hours of enjoyment each week on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out as we talk politics, religion, science, reviews of books and music, along with the occasional interview just for a twist. Join Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern as they bring fresh content to you. Walk with us through the cellar door as we help you prepare for the revolution. You can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, and even on Facebook.
Hey, this is Keith.
And this is Jen, and we're from Not Another Atheist Podcast.
You're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Join the revolution.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Sorry, I got cut off at the end there. I misjudged my outro cue. And I just... You're right, Hannah. We got to look at ways to reduce the cost, not to run it like a business, and to create a better environment for allowing students to get more money out of the state.
But we've got a new administration that says they're going to run the U.S. like a business, man.
So if they do, in true business practices, if we wanted to look at lean management, they will look at that in a completely different manner, and hopefully they will drain the swamp and let people
drain the swamp by filling it with swamp monsters.
Yep. I don't know what to say with that.
Speaking of the swamp, we're going to talk about Twitter.
We are, and this, I don't know how long this segment will go, so please forgive me if this segment goes a little bit longer. And I wanted to talk a little bit tonight about what Twitter is, how Twitter works. I guess not really that much is. I want to look at how it's influenced media campaigns. How does it work as an unchecked source? Because there is a topic that has come up recently where people have talked about how do we put in check Facebook and Twitter. They're becoming social media monsters, and people are getting all their news from these sources, so they should be monitoring them. Blah blah blah
40,
blah blah.
Over 40%, as far as the recent statistics saying that people over 40% get their daily news from Facebook, which is like, wow.
Yeah, and which is fine. I'm not opposed to that. I think what we have to do is look at the influence of what's happening. And we have to examine another reason why there's a possibility of how Trump won, right?
Yeah.
Now, if we look at Twitter and what Twitter is defined as, basically this LifeWire article says Twitter is microblogging. Twitter and tweeting is about broadcasting daily short burst messages to the world with the hope that your messages are useful and interesting to somebody else. Conversely, Twitter is about discovering interesting people online and following their burst messages for as long as they are interesting.
I don't know. Did you start using Twitter right at the beginning, or is this something you basically joined in on later on.
I joined later on when we started Atheist Analysis, and nobody ran the Twitter account there. And that's where I started tweeting.
For me, Twitter is the same way as it is with you. To me, when I first saw Twitter, they said, okay, well, you're allowed to do these 140 character bursts. Well, that's awesome. Facebook had a status update, and that was the new thing for Facebook. And Facebook was like, oh, what are you doing? You can say what you're doing now. You can post a little message or whatever. And Twitter came out and said, that's all we are. We don't have anything else. We're just this update thing, and we limit the number of characters you can use. So I was like, well, Facebook will let me write a paragraph if I want. And then it turned into like 1,000-word essays that crazy people would post everywhere. But like Twitter was like this incredibly restrictive, short bursts. It's like if I can imagine social media having attention deficit disorder, this is what I would be. I feel so restrained and restricted on Twitter that I've never been able to get interested in it.
Yes, and I don't agree or disagree with you, for once.
You just kind of like sliding off and saying okay?
Yeah. I like Twitter in the aspect that if I can get news and not people's opinions, I enjoy it more. So, for example, our friends over at Paleo Radio, when they tweet on their actual Paleo Radio account, a lot of times it's links. It's not discussion points. For example, there was one about Jeremiah crying about what we're talking about here. and you know, and I tweeted back and I said, well, hold on, I don't know if I agree with you on this. He's like, well, show me the evidence. I sent a link. It's like, oh yeah, well, I agree with you on that. Oh, well, okay, you know, that works out. But for me, when it comes down to actually engaging with people, Facebook is better. It just really is. Now, they've screwed us as an organization at Cellar Door Skeptics here because they limit our posts, they limit who sees it, blah, 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 unless you want to pay, because they're a business.
Need to make money.
Yep. And Twitter does the same thing, but on a smaller scale. So, you know, if you're not liking our tweets or tweeting back at us, you're not going to see us more often. So that's why we encourage you to go over Cellar Door, at Cellar Door Skep, and subscribe to us and follow us, and we'll tweet with you. I mean, I've been tweeting a lot more. But what I've been able to do is I've been able to send out links for our show. So things that you and I talk about, I could take that link of one of the articles we talk about and say, hey, by the way, here's what we were talking about. We know you can find these links in the description, but here you go. Here's a link. Go follow us on Twitter. And it allows me to engage in a different manner than it does on Facebook. It allows me, how about this? Twitter takes up, let's just say 5% of my time, whereas Facebook could be anywhere between 80%, 90% of my time when it comes to social media allowance. And yes, I get a social media allowance because otherwise I'd spend all my time on my phone. But that's the thing. So yeah, Twitter is kind of a pain in the ass, but it does allow you to get to the point, get right there, and move on. It's not good for dialogue. We tried to engage with Pro-Life Michigan for like a week, and finally I gave up because I would tweet at them and I'd have to send 17 tweets to get my point across, and at some point I was like, this is BS, just follow me on Facebook. And it was a worthless argument because you know
what you can do? It's what I've done a couple times. I write up something on like a Word doc, take a screenshot, and then I share the picture. Just like, here, have a paragraph, jerk off. Like that's, to me, that's Twitter, and that's what Trump is. His brain, as far as I can tell, is just fine with that 140. He got the whole message out all in that one little snap.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all you got. Yep.
I don't know what to say.
I will agree.
Right. So let's move on a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about Trump and Twitter. Yeah. Trump loves Twitter. It's like his favorite thing. Now, I'm going to tell you something.
Because he has all of the things.
He has all the things. And he loves things as equally as other things. But I want to tell you something. I did not know this. Twitter has a way to figure out, and I don't know how they do this, but there's a way to figure out what type of phone you're tweeting from, right?
Oh,
they
that's
have
pretty
figured out.
Straightforward. Anytime you connect to the internet, you have an ISP.
No, I get that.
Not an ISP, not an internet service provider.
Yes.
You have an IP address.
So look,
and that basically gives information.
I get all of that. But I didn't know anybody was paying attention, right? Because who really genuinely cares what phone you tweet from other than phone companies because they want to know who owns what?
Or big data companies who want to know everything about you and make money on that?
But there is somebody that has gone through Twitter and they basically figured out which of Donald Trump's tweets are from iPhones and which ones are for Androids. They literally have done this. And they have a Twitter bot, that goes and talks about this. So you could follow that Twitter bot and you will only get the things that are from Trump's Android phone.
That's insane.
And you can go follow one that's only ones from Trump's iPhone. It's crazy, right? But they pinned it basically down to that the Android phone, a higher percent of the time, is some of the more controversial tweets. And
so the one that isn't like being restricted, like Steve Jobs' spirit isn't like, Donald, you probably shouldn't say that.
Yes, exactly. And so they basically, now they allocate it towards them. They basically say, well, one's Trump and one's an aide. And that's happened. We know that happens. We know all those different things happen. But it's just funny because you can now go follow just Trump, or what they think is just Trump, and you would think Trump would have figured this out by now. Who the hell in Trump's campaign hasn't gone, hey, can we switch phones? Hey, Trump, let's just switch phones. You can have this phone. I know it's an iPhone. You may not
You know
like
what
it,
I think it is? You know what I think it is?
He has tiny hands. It should work better in his hand.
No, I really think that he's got multiple phones hidden all over his house. When he makes a really stupid tweet, they take it away from him. Then he goes and he finds one of his hidden phones so he can make more stupid tweets. It's like, it's 3:00 in the morning, Donald. We're taking away your iPhone. And he's like, that's fine. I got my Android in my pillowcase.
All right, fair enough. That's a new take on it. So anyway, one of the articles from Politico that we were looking at, and I know we're political heavy tonight, but one of the articles we were looking at was Trump's Twitter history. And they kind of go back and they look from May 2009 to April 2016. And they kind of look at, basically, well, how much is his Twitter gone up? Well, they kind of look, and in 2013 is when they start to see a spike. So between 2012 and 2013 is when they start to see a spike. Well, guess what happened in 2012? He makes his first explicit reference to running for president. Then
and the internet explodes. Well, you know what happened when he did that, too? I saw a video of it. John Oliver had just started or he was part of The Daily Show still. He hadn't started last week tonight. And he was talking about it. Donald Trump threatened, I'm going to run for president in 2016. And John Oliver said, do it. Do it. That's all I want. And he said, I will write the donation check right now. And he came on and he was like, I am sorry.
So his first big uptick was when he announced he was going to run for president. Then he talks about reference to Mexico and to Miss Mexico. Then he moves on, and the next big thing is his attack on Barack Obama about being a birther. Ugh. Then he moves on to his slogan. Now, this is funny because he coined this slogan in 2012, right? So he actually coined the slogan, Make America Great Again, for 4 years. 4 years before he started using it.
Well, there's also the fact that he said Make America Great Again, and that was Nixon's.
Okay, all right, fine. Don't take us off topic.
But are you kidding me? He didn't make it up. He just stole it in 2000.
That's fine. But you got to think about it, and we can look at media history. And
he was planning this all maybe that far back. Is that what you're leading to?
That's kind of where I'm moving towards, because if we talk about the handbook to politics and what is making what makes good media communication, there's literally large amounts of volumes of books, scientifically written books that talk about this, that talk about political communication and research. There's people doing research on this all the time. And there's an actual book called Handbook of Political Communication Research. Ironically
that's
enough.
Really specific. Like, this is the book that you need exactly for this situation.
And they go back farther in history. They don't just start like in 2000. They go back to the 75 and 71, and they talk about different theories and different approaches. And they talk about how different medias of political communication and their roots in observational methods through dominance of quantitative methodologies such as survey research. In addition, they like to talk about and they discuss the widespread use of content analysis and the need for more concern for visual analysis per investigations, also indicating a surprise amount of experimental research in current political communications through scholarships such and such, right? So they're looking at these different things. So if you were to take the basis and how things are covered and how you can make a statement, one of the big things is your public communication and your public opinion, right? His public opinion obviously is not something I share, but it must be something a lot of people do share, even when he started this. And he was saying things that were contradictory, that were, let's just say, out of scope, trying to make people feel uncomfortable and comfortable at the same time. Because think about it. For you, if you say, I don't know, a derogatory word, you're going to feel uncomfortable. Most of the time, most people. There's some people that don't. And so the difference is that probably there's a lot of people that do use these derogatory terms, just not publicly. And so all Donald Trump says is, well, hey, fuck it, I'm politically incorrect. Who gives a shit? I'm not saying it's okay to do this, but I'm just saying, hey, fuck all, I am that way, accept me as I am. And I think a lot of people latched onto that, but they latched onto this for different types of reasons, right? And I think that he took some of these communication and interpretive perspectives and he looked at it. And then he looked at trends and he said, okay, well, how do these different trends move through the different approaches, right? And then he watched as things evolve. So if you look at what he did with Twitter, he went in 2012 when Twitter was very big, and he went and he created a slogan. And then he utilized that slogan. Okay, he didn't create the slogan, sorry. He used another person's slogan and ran with it, right? And popularized it again. And it's kind of funny because when we used to work with Johnny a little bit, what did Johnny like to do?
Grab stuff and make it his own?
Yeah. I mean, he did. Atheist Analysis was known for that.
Yeah, no. Well, at least the marketing campaigns, like if you think about it, right? Any marketing campaign, the first person to do something, they're innovative, right? Well, what happens as soon as it's out there? Everyone mimics it to benefit from it. And then the new person has to innovate, create their new thing. Donald Trump is also a marketing man. He's in marketing. I wouldn't call him a genius, but he's very good at it. He's very good at working his way through our messy business spectrum and coming out on top because he's had a massive level of failures, but he's had more successes than failures. And he knows how to do tax law and go through all that kind of stuff. So he's been business-wise successful. And this is proof that he's been, as far as I can tell, socially successful. He's turned what I would call the largest pile of social faux pas ever amassed in the history of humans. The most insults I've ever seen any, political figure put together in random insulting fashion and turn it into a major positive. It just boggles the mind that he's using social media in such a way. Twitter is this new handle, this new monster that he's been riding on.
And so inside of this small little chapter book, right, they talk about something called the Harold Lassenwell and propaganda analysis. And this guy wrote a book, and this is way back when, but he wrote a book and he analyzed propaganda messages from Germans and French and British and Americans in World War I. And he formalized the methodology of content analysis for media messages. So basically, he's known for some sort of a 5-question model of communication. Who says what to whom, via which channels, and with what effects. And that was a conceptual revolution back in the day, and we still use it to this day. Why do you think people invest so much money? Like you jokingly said earlier, there's companies that steal all your information, right, to analyze it.
They're not joking. That was like ominous, evil, and
whatever.
dark.
But they're basing it on this type of a theory. They're basing it on Harold's theory. Basically, he came up with this. How do you look at it? So if you look at Trump's Twitter history, right, his favorite words are this: winner, yeah. Winner.
Him and Charlie
Christie,
Sheen, right?
Failed. Charlie Sheen. Bush. Apprentice. Worst. Nasty.
Nasty woman.
And so it's not Nasty Woman. And this is before Nasty Woman, just so you know.
I know.
So some of his other...
It's only one word.
Some of his other favorite words is I, you, Trump. And he's repeating these terms. He's using them as a way. He has different love and hates. And Trump tweets more adjectives than any other candidate except one person. Bernie Sanders, your favorite.
Yeah.
And he directs
they're
them
both
constantly
the
at other
populist
people,
candidate.
right? And he does this on purpose because he's directing them at other people. And if you look at the propaganda history and you look at what the Nazis did, right, and how they talked about their increasing effort in communication and how much they funded some of these different things for propaganda material, who are they targeting? What are they trying to target? And we could talk about this all day long, but the big thing is they talk about big words, right? Great, weak, lighthearted, nasty again.
If you look into what George Orwell wrote in 1984, basically he's talking about the importance of language and breaking down language to control the people. If you don't give the people the option to make the language to form their thoughts in the direction that is opposing to the party, so if you restrict it to the point where they can't say negative things, the only way you can say is good, double plus good, those good, double plus good, all that kind of stuff. It's the only option you have is positivity, and that lands directly into the way you create language towards your party. Well, this kind of stuff is the same situation. These are both popular candidates, or populist candidates when we talk about Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. And we're seeing clear use of language. We're seeing clear use of those types of manipulators when it comes to basically describing and communicating with people. If you look at using specific words like winner and stuff like that, we're seeing a change in the overall meaning of those words. I mean, we talk about the alt-right being a new modernized version of white supremacist or right supremacist or supremacist right. There's a variety of ways that people are trying to find a new way to say more specifically what that is. Donald Trump is at the forefront of language changing, and he's basically using it to his benefit.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? That's the big thing here. And that's what we're talking about is Twitter limits you in how many characters you can use. So he has to create repetitive things. And this political article talks about what he's called sad. He says Bernie Sanders giving a microphone to Black Lives Matter. Sad. New York Times puff piece about Ben Carson. Sad. Glenn Beck. Sad. Barry Diller.
Wild.
Sad. Whoopi Goldberg. Sad. He's reusing this specific word and associating it with other people. And it's basically like a subconscious type thing. And they talk again, and I'm going to relate back to this actual book because they cite scientific type studies and they cite all these different things, and they talk the political science models factored in approval ratings of the incumbent president and voter satisfaction with the economy. They talk about that. They talk about how you can use these different models for the elections, and you can use how they did political research. And later running in the ozone, during the summer of 2000, because it's 2016 now. And so reality was, as usual, different. Gore won 50% of the popular vote, and he lost narrowly in the electoral colleges. So their marketing campaigns were very different. At the time, people didn't buy into what Gore was talking about enough over what Bush was talking about, enough to overturn and go Democratic. And that was the thing, right? He lost based on these different things. And this book talks literally all about the different roles in marketing, how they can, make the business leap from business to politics. How can you merge the two? Because essentially, if you can create and judge voter behavior and look at the science behind how voters act and what they're using and how they're using it and what's the best strategies, you can take all those and apply them to the new, which is probably why we see, we go Democrat, Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican, and we move back and forth between the two, is because people are studying what worked in that time period. The problem is you can't use what worked in the 70s and say it's going to work in the 2000s. It's not going to happen. We're not going to vote the same way now as we did in the 70s. It's just,
unless you have enough
happen.
Big data. So this is where I was alluding to when I mentioned big data a little while ago. you watch House of Cards, right?
Yes.
And so you've seen up to the most recent episodes, the last season. House of Cards is using a big data, nationwide, under covert, whatever, but they're basically using this to predict what voters will do by having access to the rawest of raw data and being able to predict based on all of your, everything you purchase, the stuff that you buy, where your cards are, where you live, how much you drive every day. Like, all of this information is being collected. It's being watched. If you have a Google phone and leave your GPS on, so you have your location-specific stuff, you have apps that keep track of how much you run or how much whatever. It's keeping track of where you go every day. And Google monitors how fast you're going, and that's how it tells whether or not the highway has a traffic jam. So that's a cool thing right there, right? But also, that means that Google knows where you are at any time. And in all of this big data stuff, the stuff they can use to predict what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it. And so we look at this marketing stuff. We talk about politics and voting and the Trump marketing media mogul that it is. And it kind of blends into big data and predictive analysis and what people are going to do, and how, marketing-wise, we've kind of predicted what people are going to do as far as purchasing things for a long time. Well, now we're applying it to our political spectrum, and we'll see if our politics become completely corporatized or not, depending on, Citizens United and any of those types of things. We are at a cusp, as far as I see, technologically speaking, of what's going to happen to democracy in the future. Is it going to be controlled or let loose or what? So I'm interested to see what's going to happen, and if whether or not Trump can drive his own campaign and administration into the ground because he just left unfettered through Twitter of all places.
Yes.
Or if he's going to be able to be a productive, useful president.
And that's where the hard thing comes in. And I don't want to spend too much time on that, but that's where the hard thing comes in, because the media is judging him. And then he's accusing the media of being biased, which they are. But then he's aggressively accusing them of saying they're falsely lying, right? And that they just can't handle that he won. And that's actually what started this whole segment, is that, he went on this Twitter tirade. He went on a Twitter tirade about how he didn't win how he didn't win the popular vote. And he instead of just saying, yeah, you know what, but the Electoral College is better, and that's why, he went the opposite way. He went full fucking goddamn. He's like a troll. He's like a little troll.
Man.
He's like, it was just sad because that's what South Park is making him out to be. But okay, let's just stop with that for a second and look at him, because he won a disenfranchised vote. He did. That's how he won. He won a disconnected vote. He won a lot of areas because people like me, at least, and I won't speak for you, but at least for me, I go out of my way to attack people who are politically incorrect. I make people feel uncomfortable. Trump did the opposite. He made people like me feel uncomfortable and was trying to help those that haven't moved and think in this different manner. And that's the identity politics that I was talking about a little bit earlier, is I support those more than a lot of people. And there's a lot of people blaming identity politics for this. And I'm saying, no, hold on. It's not identity politics that has failed. It's how we're allowing this type of a mass media to take over, how we're allowing for basic bullshit facts to take over. And so Twitter shouldn't restrict Twitter should not restrict Trump. God damn it, I can't even say his name because I'm so angry with him.
It's so bad.
But Twitter shouldn't restrict. I need a do-over. Where's my do-over?
We don't have that. Life doesn't have an undo or an easy button, man.
He should not. They should not restrict him from saying these things. That's unfair. We don't want that. We don't want suppression of opinions, even if they're fucking dumb opinions. There you go. There's 4. And I want to make sure that I'm very clear. 5, whatever. I want to make sure I'm very clear that we don't shot. I want to be very clear to say that we do not want to ever restrict it. I do not want a 1984 scenario. But
I know. So the question is, with Twitter being its own corporate entity in its place,
how do you affect change, right? How do you look at that? So now, I'm going to give props to NPR, and I know that's a liberal media bullshit bias thing here, right? But I am going to give props to NPR because they went out of their way not to just debunk him and say, here's the problem with what you're claiming, Trump.
On his
Twitter
the
tirade.
illegals voting for him.
Yes. Okay,
right?
I'm sorry. We skipped that whole part, didn't we?
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Like, the big thing, like you mentioned at the beginning of the segment, so Trump is saying that the reason he lost the popular vote is because all kinds of illegals, like 3 million of them, a little bit less than the 2 million he lost by, all voted illegally for him. Well, I don't know if you remember, like, I don't know, maybe 2 months ahead of the entire election, all he did was yell that the election was rigged, beyond rigged. And now he's saying, nope, it's awesome, but there's cheating people. But the Electoral College is great now. It's not rigged anymore since I won. I mean, why would anything be rigged if I won?
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing, right? Is he's claiming it was rigged, even though he fucking won. He won the Electoral College.
Now he's not saying it's rigged. He's saying that people cheated.
Exactly. Now, in all fairness, let's just be fair here. He claimed they were going to cheat well before this, though.
Yeah.
Let's be evidently clear here that this is not a new revelation. The difference here, though, is he did claim he would not concede unless he won. Right, or not, I'm sorry, I'm saying that
Basically,
wrong.
he said that he would not be happy unless he won.
Yes.
And then if anybody contests against him, he would be angry, obviously.
Yep. And so he won this. He won the election. He's going to be our next president unless this recount does some miracle thing here, and I don't think it will.
I don't expect it to, but I guess my argument for the recount is that if it comes back and says, okay, this is exactly what it is. There was no lying, there was no cheating. It gives me more faith in the system that, hey, you know what? It did work exactly as I was supposed to, and Trump won, unfortunately.
All right, well, we're not going to get into the voter recount right now because I don't agree with you. But in all fairness, he basically said, if I win, I'm not going to contest anything. Well, he's contesting it now.
Well,
he already won.
He didn't
he's
win
violating
everything.
his promise.
He didn't win everything. If he doesn't win everything, he can complain.
So now he's basing a statement off of something from True the Vote, which is a stupid name. I'm sorry.
InfoWars. Which,
well, okay, hold on. True the Vote is the one that started to share this, and they're the one that are trying to give legitimacy to what InfoWars shared. InfoWars actually shared True the Vote, so it started originally with True the Vote. InfoWars is the one that started popularizing it because
they're all big enough to get everywhere.
Yes. Exactly. And so we all know InfoWars has that, Alex Jones, blah, 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 blah. He's got some attention.
The videos of him crying were so awesome.
All right, you're moving off topic again. But, so they're the ones that popularized this. But in reality, it was this guy named Greg Phillips from @JumpVote, which is basically True the Vote. And, I don't even know what the hell this organization does, but their goal is to help empower fellow citizens, increase public awareness, advocate for continued election improvements and reforms, and speak out about the misleading message of those who insist voter fraud doesn't exist. Now,
that's great.
That sounds like a good mission statement.
Welcome ideological don't cheat. Now, provide evidence that voter fraud does exist.
Yes, which is what they have not done.
Of course
since they've been accused a second
exist.
time. They have not gone after and been able to demonstrate. This is all lane base, and even InfoWars states this. This is all lane base to a study that was done years ago by basically some place called Monkey Cage. Sorry, not Monkey Bone. That's a movie. Monkey Cage.
That was a Brendan Fraser movie. Wasn't
That was. It was done by Monkey Cage, and they basically talk about all these surveys and how they did all this analysis, and it was all fraudulent. And that if you take it and round it out, based on a populist estimate, you're going to get between 2 and 3 million voters that are illegals. And they did this all based off surveys, and then they claimed this is credible. This is 100% credible.
Money. They have enough money to do a legitimate, non-biased estimate poll and basically call it a nationwide. I mean, the Pew Foundation does that, and they have millions and millions of dollars. I haven't heard of Monkey Bone
It's on the Washington Post. It's Monkey Cage. Anyway.
Monkey Cage.
Yeah. So there's been responses, and then a peer-reviewed article against it. Now, if a peer-reviewed article comes out against you, at some point, don't you go, okay, hold on. I can't continue in this delusion anymore. I got to at least at some point
accept the scientific analysis?
Yeah. But if they can't do that,
then they
how are
cry
they gonna do
like
it?
Alex Jones.
And so, yes. And so they talk. This specific article on Science Direct
is a paywall.
It is a paywall. It is a paywall. I will warn you. It's a paywall.
Light paywall.
But they talk about the perils of cherry-picking low-frequency events in large sample surveys. And they basically talk about how they feel it's debunked because of this. And that's the whole point of it. You know, the NPR article talks about peer-reviewed articles that comes from research teams. And they say, well, if we look at this Harvard-based one, they're making this up. They're using bullshit studies, and they're not accurately looking at what is a significant value versus what is not.
Also, if you think about it statistically, like, right, if you have, let's say, a low finance, relatively small statistical base, so, I mean, we have 300 plus million people in this country. Let's say you do 3,000 people, and you find a certain number of those people voted and they were illegal. 1, 2, 4%, or 1, 2, 4 people out of that total. And then you decide, okay, well, that number is indicative of the entire country. That is going to be a false finding. Like, that's what you're talking about, the low numbers. Is people are saying, well, we did a survey and we found one person out of 1,000. Well, that obviously means that if you scale that up to this country, that thousands and possibly millions of people voted that were illegal. Well, I hate to break it to you, but your number more than likely is probably not consensusly organized for the entire country itself. And so that's what they're talking about when it comes to peer reviewing and statistical upgrading, that it doesn't work for the original numbers. And these people check it out and they obviously find it negative.
Yep, and this is what it says. It says the results we show are completely accounted for by the very low frequency measurement error. Further, the likely percentage of non-citizen voters in the recent U.S. election is...
I'm going to guess a big fat O.
It's a big fat 0.
Good. Okay, so Science Direct, peer-reviewed, says the number is so low it's relatively 0. So the recount and all that kind of stuff, we may just get a confirmation. And Donald Trump will continue to be whatever he is, but I'm a fan of at least checking it out.
Yes. And I think as we close the show out, we got to look at that, right? We got to look at what voter fraud is, and we do have to take it seriously because
how infrequent it is.
You're right. And there's articles we didn't even get to that actually talk about how there's like 31 counts out of 1 billion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
so effectively
so
it's zero. And
well, we had a couple this year that were Trump supporters that voted twice.
All right, yes, exactly, yeah. And they talk about this, and they go into a whole... The Trump campaign provided NPR with a 45-page document listing instances of voter fraud, intimidation, and registration fraud, some of which are only listed as alleged instances that go back a decade. However, the Trump campaign has yet to provide evidence of the widespread fraud involving millions of voters, in fact, swaying the president election the way it did. And so the problem is, to me, here, is that they need to come out with this proof before the recount happens. They need to demonstrate in some way, shape, or form how this is going to happen and where we're going to go from here. Because if Donald Trump and this other vote, the new vote or whatever the hell that's called, if they can't actually demonstrate this before these recounts happen, to me, all they're doing is waiting to see what the outcome is before they attack. They're just looking for a different way to attack this in a different manner to be able to credit Trump based on social media theory, which is what we talked about at the beginning of the segment, because all Trump's doing is taking media theory and applying it to how to make his life greater again, not ours. Thank you so much for joining us. Subscribe to us on Spreaker, iTunes, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and have a good night, everyone.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker, cellardoorskeptics.com.